Hello, everyone. I'm Meriwether McClory. I'm the Senior Artistic Programs Manager here at the Ranch. Welcome to our visiting artist with Mikey Yates. Mikey's visit, thank you. Mikey's visit is generously supported by the Francis Gordon Kansas City Visiting Artist Fund. Before we get started, Anderson Ranch acknowledges that our campus resides on the traditional, ancestral territory of the Ute people, who called the Roaring Fork Valley and beyond home for over 800 years. Mikey Yates has a BFA from Missouri State University and an MFA from the University of Colorado Boulder. His recent solo exhibitions include 2 summers at Coma Gallery in Sydney, Australia, Overtime at Shulamit Nazarian in Los Angeles, and Boomerang at Tamar Grane in London. His work has been featured in group exhibitions at the Columbus Museum of Art, The Hole in New York City, Shulamit Nazarian in Los Angeles, Stephen Zevitas Gallery in Boston, and 1969 Gallery in New York. His work has been featured twice in New American Paintings, and in addition to Forbes, Boom, and Juxtapose. Mikey is the recipient of several awards and residencies, including the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture, the Charlotte Street Foundation Studio Residency in Kansas City, and is a 2-time recipient of the Elizabeth Greenshield Foundation grant. He currently lives and works in Kansas City. Please join me in welcoming Mikey Yates.
Thank you. All right. Thanks to Anderson Ranch for having me. Thank you, Meriwether, for that introduction. As I was saying, I'm going to start in chronological order. This is my early work. And yeah, I think my first memories of art or drawing is sitting around at the dining table when I was a kid and having printer paper and pencils and colored pencils and drawing basketball players and Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter with my brothers. I grew up in and around military bases for pretty much my entire upbringing. So this is Germany. I was born in Germany, and yeah, I just kept on moving around my whole life. And yeah, I don't think a lot of people know what military bases look like, so I wanted to bring in some pictures. It's pretty boring. Everything is uniform. The buildings are musty and tan. But this is the inside of the house. I think a lot about the contrast between the outside and the inside. My mom is from the Philippines, so I have a huge family in the Philippines, and she moved to LA when she was 27, and my dad is in the Army. So what happened was my mom and my 2 oldest brothers moved from the Philippines to Germany, to Bavaria, which is kind of this wild transition. But it's also on an American military base, so there's a lot going on there. Yeah, so this is kind of a school performance where we're singing patriotic songs, and this is the backyard in one of those buildings I was talking about. Yeah, so growing up, I just wanted to be in the NBA. That was it. That's all I really planned for. So, middle school, high school, all of that. They always tell you, Shaq and Ray Allen were also military children, and they also lived overseas. So I was like, oh, like I could do it too. But I wasn't even the best player on my like youth services team. Um, so yeah, I really just planned for that. And when I got injured when I moved to San Antonio, not in a tornado, this is just describing like the next few years. And I think I realized like I wanted to do something that wasn't dependent on being injured, or so like music or art or something like that. So I started making a lot of music and dropped out of college. I tried to go to the school for audio production in Houston. I went to study plant science in Arizona. I was getting in a lot of trouble, so my mom had me go to the Philippines and stay with my uncle. And then my mom ended up moving from Korea to Fort Leonard Wood, which is in southern Missouri. And I decided to move back in. I was like 21 and go to community college and get my GPA up to a 2.0 so I could make t-shirts. That's what I decided I was gonna do. So when I was in the Philippines, my uncle, he's an architect, and he was trying to show me, like he gave me this book about like AutoCAD. And instead of like designing bathrooms and stuff, I would just draw lines and make like fake logos. So I thought that I was gonna make t-shirts when I got back. But really, I was just making music, and this was like a really big part of my life. When I moved from the Philippines to Fort Leonard Wood and then to Springfield, Missouri, yeah, so this is me and my band. So my first drawing class was with Joey Borovica, and it was for like the graphic design program, but I had never stood up and drawn a picture before. Like just like this at like the table or whatever. So I was standing up, drawing still lifes with charcoal, and I was just like, how do you, like, I just want to do this, you know? I was finally getting good grades in school in the drawing and painting classes, so I asked him like what you could do, because I had no idea. And he said you could work at the library with a general degree. And I was like, oh, that's it. He's like, or you could teach. And I was like, all right, cool. So I went downstairs and I changed my major. And I still look at these paintings all the time. So I don't have any pictures here of my undergrad work, but there's a lot of still lifes, it was like a state school, so it was really structured like that, like still lifes, figure drawing. And then I applied for a job at the library, and I didn't get it. So I worked at a warehouse at Bass Pro. I don't know if you know what that is. It's like a hunting store. And I did that for a while, and I applied to graduate school. I didn't get into graduate school. But I applied for this job called imagery. And if you've been into a Bass Pro store, they're like dioramas, there's big paintings and sculptures of rocks. And I got this job where you travel to different stores and decorate pretty much based off of the local environment. So I would sculpt these rocks. I would like hold the goat or whatever, and like, I don't know, where do you want to drill the feet down, like on these rocks. But I learned a lot about rocks and plants and trying to sculpt a rock. So we would spray foam, carve it, and then epoxy it. And then I got into grad school. And I was really trying to just learn how to paint. Yeah, so, I mean, I didn't start painting until I was maybe 21 or 22. So I just really wanted to learn how to paint representationally, and so it was like a self-portrait and one of my friend. I went to a workshop in Tennessee with Nicolas Uribe, and I was just trying to paint like him. Like I was just like, let me just like copy Nicolas Uribe's like marks and stuff, and like how does he do it, you know? So I went to a workshop and I learned so much. And when I got back, this is still not graduate school, but this was like more influenced probably by my Bass Pro job where there were dioramas, like material and paint. They wouldn't let me paint at Bass Pro. But I thought a lot about the idea of dioramas. Yeah, so this relates to the whole music thing. I was making beats for rappers for a while, and then with my band too, I was making pretty much the skeleton of the song. So I would sample records, and this is just visually thinking about samples and trying to make cool looking things that kind of were telling a story. So yeah, I was just thinking about like how you would sample a record. You would take maybe like a kick drum off this and a snare off this and like the different textures, and then making something cohesive. And then I was also going through a lot of family photos. I think at this time I was at CU Boulder, and I'm probably like 25 now, and I think I watched a lot of my friends join the Army, and I was thinking kind of about this cycle. Like my grandpa was an orphan, and he joined the Army, and then my dad joined the Army to pay for college, and then my mom joined the Army, and then my brothers joined the Army to also pay for college, and just thinking about like this, just watching my friends kind of grow up, and me just being in school like painting. And then, yeah, some more family photos and thinking about drawing at the dinner table. I feel like that's a theme that just comes up a lot. And basketball. And then, like in those like collage pieces, I was trying to say something about like all these different places and like basketball and like I thought it looked cool, but it wasn't really conveying what I was trying to say. So I made this big painting that, also I was in graduate school, and people weren't very straightforward with their work, and I was really struggling to understand what people were doing. And so yeah, I just wanted to make something that kind of represented like my dreams to play in the NBA and thinking about growing up, and like taking, you know, as I was looking through like these family photos, I was thinking about like all these missing pieces of things there aren't pictures of. So I found all of these Slam magazine posters that I used to rip out, and every time we would move, I'd hang them above my bed. And I would draw them when I was little. And yeah, like the goal was to be an ESPN on that art thing. Like there used to be a kids art. I was like, oh, I could never do that. That's too good. So I was thinking about more, just more things of growing up that I would see maybe that I would be talking to my friends about, or, you know, telling stories about, and I just decided to paint those. So it's just like cleaning your shoes with a toothbrush, keeping them clean, and like these military buildings in the back again. Yeah, and then thinking about collage kind of like in this way of, like playing video games with my brothers, playing Tekken Tag, and it's dark, and you got like Cheez-Its on your fingers, and there's like all these collage elements of like an East Bay catalog there. That's like where you would order your shoes or jackets or whatever. And my brother's tattoo, I don't know, it's really dark. I don't know if you can see it. My brother has like a big Filipino tattoo on his arm. And just things that I was like surrounded by growing up that I thought was really interesting, like to all have in one household. And then the same thing, this was my studio in Colorado, and I was thinking about like the kitchen. So there's like German steins, and then my mom's like duster with all the patterns, and then my brother's in the kitchen. And then I tried to think about my apartment and like how the things would tell stories or talk about a place, but I mean, it's like a salt lamp, and it ended up being more about just my relationship with my partner. Like we moved into an apartment, a tiny apartment, because Boulder's super expensive. And it just became about like sharing space and like our objects, and like every day I would come home and she would be in the bathtub. She was an art teacher. That's our apartment. Yeah. So we had like a fold out like table. So all these like repeated things. I think I titled this one "Eggs and Rice." It's just like breakfast. And like these objects keep reappearing. I was thinking about, and this is like pre-pandemic. And then we lost our studios during the pandemic, but luckily I had this little garage space. You couldn't fit a car in there, but I was able to paint out of there. And yeah, I was thinking more about like my path. Like I just had so many friends in the army and stuff, and I was making paintings and thinking about making art during what feels like the apocalypse. Like it was Colorado, so it was really, there's forest fires at the same time, so there's this crazy light that would be like pink. So there's like bills, and then like my dog's tennis ball, and like kind of all these things. And yeah, I made a lot of paintings in this small apartment. This is like after work as a school teacher during the pandemic. And a lot of drawings. So like in those paintings where I was collaging sort of things, there's a lot of the back of the heads. Because I wanted to focus on the objects and the things around it, like how they tell the story of the person. So there's just like a lot of back of the heads or not fleshed out figures. And when I was painting these faces, I would draw them first, like with the soft pastels. I just wanted their identity to not be the focus. I wanted the atmosphere and the kind of environment to be the focus. So this is like spaghetti in bed with my dog and my partner in my brother's backyard. And I was still like drawing and painting from life, like in the mirror. This was in that little garage. Yeah, it was like a big shift. So we got our studios back, and that was awesome. And I was like, I'm just gonna paint huge paintings, because I don't know when I'll get to do this again, you know? But the pandemic brought up a lot of feelings of being like nervous for your parents, I think. And it was a really familiar feeling for me. And I was trying to like, you know, I was talking to my brothers a lot about it. And I think just growing up, I was always nervous for both of my parents because they'd be deployed. So I was really like thinking about this military base, kind of growing up, and this is kind of thinking about that being with my brother and like sharing our drawings. And then in the back, kind of depicting the base and like basketball players. And there's like my first fight is in the back right there. I was really thinking about cinematography. I was watching a lot of TV and, telling stories through cinema is like there's panning, there's all these different things you could do, zooming. So I was trying to just bring everything into it in these paintings. And then at the same time, I was also living in Colorado, which, like when the sun sets and it's snowy, it's really blue. And like that twilight time was really interesting to me. So I was trying to paint that, like after the sunset, but it's not dark yet. And your eyes kind of adjust, like playing basketball or something like that. So the idea was these kids are facing a basketball game, but behind them there's like a lot going on. That's what it kind of looks like up close. So this is like the gate where they would like check under your car and check your ID. A lot of gates, and then still like sampling in the way of like, these are the shoes that I had. These are the basketball shoes that I had. And this is my brother swearing in to the reserves, so I'd like would take the shirt. And then I moved to Kansas City after graduating in this free studio program, but they said that I couldn't use oil paint. I was like, dang. So I bought acrylic paint, and I struggled for a minute. I was really trying to have more bold color, but ended up just making like a lot of rainbowy paintings from this time. But thinking about things like home, the painting on the end over there is like a Christmas in Carson, California. That's where my auntie lives. And that's like this staple, like has been in the same apartment since I was born, where everything else is kind of moving parts. This is like a home base. And then I talked to the people, and I was like, I really want to use oil paint. I did a studio visit with Mikey at KU, and his paintings are so good, and the body on the paint is just so visceral. And I remember going back to my studio, just being like, all right, I'm gonna buy a little air filter, explain myself, and I just, I bought a bunch of oil paint, and I was so happy. But there's also things about acrylic paint that I realized I liked. So I kept using it for like moving things around, like in the very beginning of paintings. And here's kind of like that process of doing a drawing in soft pastel and then putting it into a bigger painting. And this is like, yeah, there's that Grant Hill drawing from the first slide. That's like how I'm taking things from family photos, like the dog, and I just, and yeah, just building like these over time with the different artifacts that I would find in my house when I would go back. Since my mom was at Fort Leonard Wood, then they moved to Hawaii, and then Killeen, Texas, and then Fayetteville, North Carolina. So those were it's kind of like my home by proxy. Like, that's where I would go home to, even though I'd never been there before. And like the inside of our house is just like it's all the same stuff, no matter like what was outside. It was my mom, and then my mom and my cousin. I was still thinking a lot about color and like how to not use a limited palette for everything. And I was still always thinking about like this blue time, and like you can't really take pictures of it. I would just go for walks like at certain times and take mental notes of what kind of blues are out there. So this is my auntie's. It's the title of the painting is Aunties in the Philippines, and these are all kind of pictures that I've taken up until this point. And then there's like people on the buildings, still thinking about cinematography and kind of simplifying the face. Also, Twilight. But here there's like starting to be some repetition like in facial forms. I don't know if you can see it kind of like echoes out. And then I went on a residency called Adventure Painting with these crazy landscape painters. And it was 2 weeks in Banff. And we would just wake up every day and go paint. And that was amazing. And I thought a lot about the landscape and attentiveness, and kind of like how I fell in love with painting was like painting still lifes. I just felt like it was something I could focus on for 8 hours, and like I found that again out here. And back to my studio, making some more paintings. Oh yeah, I was gonna talk about this transparency too that started maybe here. There's like layers that I just wanted, like I really wanted the And One logo to be visible. So I kind of just painted it through like on that piece of paper. Or like the other shirt from the Philippines, like I just continued it. And it's the same thing with like the Allen Iverson jersey. I wanted like the number 3. I wanted you to know it was the Allen Iverson jersey. So it was like really gradual, but that's kind of how I started making space for everything to be in the painting. So things weren't like standing in front of each other. But I was also thinking about, so this was from 2023, and yeah, just as I got older, kind of processing that kind of growing up during wartime, like, and before like internet communication, you would go to school one day and like 2 of your best friends would be gone. They'd be like, they moved. I'm like, oh dang, because it's like a high like deployment base, and so there's a lot of relocation. So I was thinking about that, and then I was also thinking about losing friends as I got older, and at the same time thinking about wanting to be in the NBA and practicing by myself and kind of imagining what's happening on the basketball court, because I was moving so much and because I would be like a new kid all the time, or my friends would leave or something like that. So I kind of recreated this, and then yeah, it's like recurring motifs of like this gate in the back with these military vehicles. And then simultaneously, I was kind of getting used to Kansas City a little bit. My partner's family is from out there, so yeah, just thinking about like the landscape and home. And then I was thinking about how me and my brothers would just go to random places like Fayetteville, North Carolina, where my parents would now live, and just look at all these pictures. Yeah, I feel like their house is like a moving organism, and I'll just uncover things, and that's how I found like those drawings from when I was little, and then these pictures from the Philippines that are starting to like warp. Yeah, and just thinking about home. And then the most interesting thing to me about like the I feel like I'm always painting what I'm most interested in. So I made one of these paintings and it was smaller. I just wanted to explore that further, and make a giant one with more buildings and like more kids, and really thinking about like the contrast of kids and the military industrial complex and childhood and being confronted with death at a young age and all these kind of things. Yeah, so this one is titled "I Wish It Would Rain" after the Temptations. And in that song, he's like, his girlfriend left him, and he's crying, but he wishes it would rain so it would cover his tears. Man, I was just thinking about how, like in this hyper-masculine environment of a military base, that's kind of like passed down to the kids, and yeah, kind of this weird attitude, and me just embracing being soft, like. And then in like that building over there, you can see like that pink is like my mom cooking. Because I was thinking about like that contrast between the exterior and interior. Yeah, and then I went to Maine for 3 months, and it looked like this. There's not a lot there, and I didn't have to cook, I didn't have to clean, I didn't have to do anything, I didn't have any responsibilities, and I had a great time. But also, I've had a lot of conversations, and I was talking to my friend about, he called it psychological white space, where you're taken out of your routine and you're able to kind of think about things or that you maybe didn't have time to process, or in your daily routine, you're just like always on to the next thing. And I was thinking about the last 2 years of like being in the studio all the time and attending Zoom funerals, like kind of this thing I couldn't stop thinking about. And we would do like novenas, so we would meet to pray 9 times, and yeah, I went to a lot of them because we couldn't travel. So yeah, it's like this dystopian thing, but it's also warm to see your family like in all different parts of the world. And then also just painting the studio, like painting this floor. Like formally, this was the first time I started this in Maine, so I worked on the wall, and you could really like put your footprint in it. So I like put my foot, and like, and there's a lot of like, yeah, just moving stuff around. And then I went back to my studio, which is just way different than this. This is an abandoned haunted house, and mine's in the red building. It's called the Chambers of Edgar Allan Poe. And it's in this place called the West Bottoms that's mostly haunted houses. But yeah, so there I was able to kind of just paint, and I was really thinking about my time in Maine. There was bonfires every night, and just painting friends. And then this painting was, so by the dorms, there's a dock, and you can swim out to a floating dock. And I would do that all the time. And I was just amazed how, like, it's the same thing, recurring thing of, like, your eyes adjusting in the dark. And so thinking about, like, when I would come back to my bed, and I would be like, okay, this was like a cobalt blue, but then this was like over here and over here. And then one night when I was asleep, my friend Fernando, he was like, you gotta come outside and look at these stars. They're reflecting in the lake. And so I went out there and we were like, oh my gosh. it was just really beautiful. I made like 3 versions of this painting. And then, yeah, it was just something that I did all the time. So things would move and the light would be different some nights. Sometimes there would be no stars. Sometimes there would be like a million shooting stars. Sometimes the constellations would move. This is my brother's apartment in downtown LA, and I thought like this architecture looked like a kung fu movie, and I was just really into it. And so it's really dark in there because it's like it blocks all the sun. It's in the middle. So he had all these plants in the one area that they would grow. And it was just interesting to see my brother in that space. I feel like I always recalibrate everything when I see my family. Like tell stories and talk and everything. So this is my studio when I was working on those 2 paintings. And this is, I was thinking about so I had a show in Australia and it was summertime. It opened on the first day of summer in Australia. And I had made it over the summer in both Maine and Kansas City. And I was just thinking about processing grief, but also having fun, and then just like the multitudes of summer. That's my friend Sergio, and a lot of solace from the outside world and like these private talks and things like that. So that's the work in the space. And then this is what I'm working on here. I wrote, it's really dark. But both of these started from conversations. So the one on the left, my dad, we were going through pictures, and he's like, look, I got the same running form as your brother. And my brother ran cross country. And I was just thinking about that, but they couldn't be like more opposite people. My brother's a labor organizer. But just thinking about how internally, like you can't, like, I think it's just funny that they have the same movements, like, it's just DNA. And then, so I'm like combining like a San Antonio summer and also military base. I feel like I just start paintings all the time, and then I process them as I go. Symbols will like uncover themselves. And then this one is recreating my friend who I used to make music with is still making music, and he sent me a music video that we made in my studio apartment. But I don't have any pictures of this apartment, and I use it as like my painting studio and my like music making studio, and there's just records everywhere. So I'm just recreating that based off of these little snippets of this video that he sent me. And thinking about that right now. And that's it. Thanks. Thanks.
So instead of collaging, it sounds like you're doing a lot of sampling of memories. Can you talk about how nostalgia and sentimentality play into these new compositions and what you think that then adjusts the meaning of them? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think for certain paintings, I'll have more context for like the world as I grow up, like systems that are in place, like why was this like this? And I'll be, just more critical as I get older of the military-industrial complex, of of all that from when I'm like 16 on, And yeah, so there's also paintings that are from right now, you know, like these were pretty. I was making them as I was experiencing, and yeah, so I feel like it's like processing maybe just in a different way, and I'll have different feelings as I grow older, you know. I don't know how it changes them. Yeah.
So, oh, just loud. Okay. A lot of your paintings, they really do look like stills from a movie. So, my question, I guess, is more on the fun side. So, what movies are you looking at that are you drawing inspiration from?
I have screenshots from Snowfall, that TV show, and I just like take pictures. I also like kung fu movies, whatever. Like if there's like a certain light on the face, I'll just take a bunch of pictures and think about those later. Yeah. I don't know what I'm watching. I'm not really watching a lot of TV right now. I have a lot of music videos. Like I've always watched music videos growing up, and I continue to watch music videos even though there's not really like a platform for it other than YouTube. But yeah, growing up like really into music, like those two things collided a lot. Yeah.
I really like the hands and feet in a lot of your paintings. They seem elongated and they really draw interest. And I just wondered if you could talk about your thought process there.
Yeah, I think a lot of them that are like that, think about adolescence and just like this, and like basketball, like this long, goofy body, you know, that you don't really have control of. And I think that's a way to just, for me, thinking about being a kid. Yeah, that's pretty much.
Do you think you always had a strong visual memory?
No. I do always remember thinking like, oh, like I'm looking out of my eyes, like, and just thinking that how that was like as a kid, like little kid, how that was different from what other people were seeing, and no, but I try really hard to just be attentive to things, like light or things. I paint from life a lot, and I feel like just being attentive, like you're able to kind of like feel the magic of the world, you know, and kind of taking notes for that and how, like when I'm creating these like more like layered paintings, like how, like, oh, I remember painting this and this was like this, and that's something I was interested in. So like taking a lot of notes by painting from life. And yeah, I feel like musically that's like the equivalent to like jamming with somebody. It's like in the moment and you're there and you're responding and it's quick. And then making one of like these longer paintings is like writing a composition where you're maybe taking notes from what you were doing. Or like, oh, that idea was cool. Here's this, and then here's this, and you're sitting down trying to make it all come together.
This is just more of a comment of how grateful I am to have heard you speak. And I don't know if you've given this talk before, but I think it's amazing that you went through your whole trajectory. And I can't tell you how fascinated I am at how Bass Pro Shop work influenced your trajectory, it seems.
Yeah, thank you so
And
much.
opened some things. So I'm just super grateful that you shared all that with us. And I hope you share it with a lot of people.
Thank you.
Because I especially think young people, you know, you never know where the spark's going to come from.
Yeah, I mean,
The I can do will come from.
I really got lost in my notes here, like, because I was nervous, so I missed a lot. But I was going to talk about how when I like entered that drawing class and painting, I've always been on the periphery of something creative. Like when I was playing basketball, I was really into the shoes, and I would customize my friends' shoes in high school. My brothers were a big influence, like how they dress, and how they customize like their airbrush their Timberlands or like customize their Air Force Ones. So I was always doing something like that. I was getting in trouble for graffiti. I was copying tattoos off people. Like I was just drawing them because I thought that was the only thing that you could do with art is be a tattoo artist. That's just because that's the only thing that I saw. But I was scared of needles, so I would just draw it and work on my typography, and I just didn't know. So yeah, I mean, I think it was always brewing, but I was never in a class where they were like, yeah, you know. So really, I feel like I was preparing for it a long time ago. I just didn't know about it.
All right, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks.